Guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about Back to the Future. We'll see if time travel is actually possible. Welcome back to the format, The Science of the Future. Today we're combining science with science fiction to see what happens. The first thing we'll look at is time travel and whether it's possible. The first time travel occurs at the Twin Paints small parking lot, where a very slow car comes out of this truck. Doc then puts a dog inside, and with the remote control, at a certain point, he makes the car move at a specific speed. The car reaches 88 miles per hour and goes at a certain speed. As soon as it reaches that speed, the flux capacitor starts going crazy, then there's a flash of light, and the car disappears. But after a minute, the car returns, completely frozen. Now, is this just science fiction, or could it become a reality? So, what's interesting is that Back to the Future took some of the ideas not only from science fiction, but also from real science about time travel, and tried to incorporate them into the plot. It starts with a journey to the future, which is actually the best approach, because from a theoretical standpoint, it's much easier to travel to a future moment than to go back in time. But how can this be done? But how does time travel work? In a black hole, there is a mass that slowly begins to slow down time. So if I get close to a massive object, time for me slows down. However, this isn't an instant process, as we see in the film with explosions and such. When I move away from that mass and return, I'll find that much less time has passed for me compared to you. This is based on the concept of time dilation, a real phenomenon predicted by Einstein's theory of general relativity. In simple terms, the stronger the gravitational field you're in, the slower time moves for you relative to someone who is farther away from that mass. But how do you travel to the past? Now, this is much more complicated, even from a theoretical standpoint. We don't know if it's possible. There are things in the universe that seem to only move in one direction, and the arrow of time might be pointing in just one direction. We don't know for sure. The arrow of time. The arrow of time is a concept that describes the one-way flow of time, which moves from the past to the future. In other words, it symbolizes the idea that time flows in one direction and cannot be reversed. This idea is closely related to the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy, the disorder or randomness in a system, increases over time, meaning natural events and physical processes evolve in one direction, from the past to the future. The arrow of time and the flow of time make us perceive time as a phenomenon that has a defined direction. So, in general, while we can remember the past, we cannot travel back in time. The future is uncertain, and we cannot predict exactly how it will unfold, though we can make predictions based on the laws of physics. Why is cold so fascinating? Cold is considered fascinating because it represents a state of low energy. In physics, cold is seen as low temperature, where particles move more slowly compared to when they are warmer. Cold can seem even more intriguing because it is associated with particular physical phenomena, such as crystallization, freezing, and generally the slowing down of molecular activity, contrasting with the more dynamic processes of heat. The Earth's movement and cosmic displacement. The Earth is constantly moving, both around its axis, causing the day-night cycle, and around the Sun, in an elliptical orbit. Furthermore, the Milky Way, the galaxy to which Earth belongs, is moving through the universe. And like all galaxies, it has a dynamic position that changes over time. The Earth is also subject to the complex movement of the entire galaxy through the cosmos, where gravitational forces influence our trajectory and that of other celestial bodies. When we think of cold in space, we must consider that outer space is essentially a vacuum, devoid of molecules that can retain heat. The temperatures in deep space are extremely low, about negative 270 degrees Celsius, because there is no material to directly trap heat, except for the cosmic background radiation, which is a form of radiation left over from the Big Bang. The low temperature of space is also due to the fact that there are no atmospheres or gases that can directly heat the vacuum. But now let's talk about three major paradoxes. The first paradox is known as the grandfather paradox, which is actually a paradox of consistency. This means that if I go back in time and kill my grandfather before he conceives my mother or father, what should happen? In the movie, Marty at one point prevents his parents from meeting, and eventually he begins to fade away. The second paradox is the knowledge paradox, and it's seen in the Johnny B. Good scene in the trilogy. When Marty plays Johnny B. Good, a song that doesn't exist yet, Chuck Berry hears it and thinks it's amazing. The last paradox is the coexistence paradox. There's a moment in the trilogy where there are too many DeLoreans in the same place. This means that there's mass or energy, and for physics, this is a problem. It's the same thing that appeared out of nowhere in 1955 and disappeared in 1985. This is not ideal because mass must be conserved. So if it disappears on one side and appears on the other, it creates an issue. In the film, there's a moment where virtually there are 4 DeLoreans. End of the time paradox. In the future, it's also possible with a black hole within reach. But traveling to the past is much more complicated, and we don't know if it's possible. Now let's analyze the future in Back to the Future. Sorry for the pun. But how is this topic treated? Well, in the future, we have shoes that self-tie, clothes that tighten and dry by themselves, hoverboards everywhere. But the worst thing is the pizza that expands. That's really impressive. So, you have to understand that science fiction somehow inspires some determined people who eventually try to build those things. Let's start with an example. At one point, Nike actually created shoes in 2 versions, called the Air Mag, which we can buy for $25,000 a pair if we want. Just to give you an idea. So, you have to understand that science fiction somehow inspires some determined people who eventually try to build those things. Let's start with an example. At one point, Nike actually created shoes in 2 versions, called the Air Mag, which we can buy for $25,000 a pair if we want. Just to give you an idea. But the problem is that they can't self-regulate. Shape memory fabrics do exist, but we would need to find a way to fold excess fabric, like what Batman uses in Nolan's trilogy. However, even in Back to the Future, there are extra folds of fabric. But the hoverboard is possible. A company called Arx Pax actually made one. And if you place this hoverboard on a copper track, it will lift off. But you can't brake in any way. As long as there's an initial track, it's fine. But if you go off it, you'll fly off. But there is also a magnetic hoverboard that works on water. But now let's see if pizza is part of our future. Well, no, not at all. But pay attention, dehydrated food is widely used in space, especially in space missions. Luca Parmitano had dehydrated tiramisu. It's food from which all the water has been extracted through a very complicated process. At that point, you follow the instructions on how much water to add, and you do it with a straw. You put it in a microwave that allows the food to absorb the water, then you take it out and eat it. The only problem is that they don't expand. They stay the same size. Now let's talk about flying cars. The first time we see a flying car is at the end of the first movie. When Doc arrives with the car, the wheels retract and the car becomes aerodynamically designed. Then, the car flies away. In the third episode, however, even a locomotive flies. But nowadays, people no longer think about flying cars, but rather about Iron Man's suit, for example. In general, we could do it with propellers like those in vertical takeoff aircraft. It would definitely be environmentally unfriendly. But above all, they have now tried to create metallic cars that are half airplane and half car. Some of these are even for sale for a few $1 billion. Some billionaires have bought them for fun. Today, there are also magnetically levitated trains, which are real and actual technology. They exist in Japan to connect cities. A train that would take an airplane to reach the city center covers 30 kilometers in 7 minutes and 20 seconds because it travels at more than 500 kilometers per hour and can reach up to 600 kilometers per hour. So guys, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Also, hit the notification bell to stay updated on new content. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments. See you in the next video.